and we'll get more information on the Eagles moving forward here as we bring in Jeff McLane, Philly.com, the Philadelphia Inquirer here on 97.3 ESPN. Jeff, how you doing, pal?
Hey guys, how you doing?
Always good, and good to have you. You know, the Parkey thing's interesting, obviously, because he had been injured, Jeff, during the preseason, and then obviously he didn't kick a lot during the preseason. The Monday night game, the start of the year, he misses that kick, and some people wonder if he was still kind of injured. Is this something that you think happened before the Jet game, during the Jet game, or was this something that was lingering?
I don't know. He said that he felt it the first time he kicked during warm-ups before the Jets game, in terms of it being this bad, so where there was three muscles that were torn. I asked him specifically if he felt that he had been kicking with torn muscles, and he said he really didn't know. He's had MRIs before in the groin, he said, but none of them showed 3 tears. It was only recently the recent MRI that he had yesterday that showed it. So I don't know. I mean, Chip Kelly had said Monday during the press conference that it was a different injury, but to me it just sounds like it was just the same injury, just a further aggravation of the injury. And it's probably something, again, that dates all the way back to the end of last year when he did have a groin injury. He said a couple of weeks ago that injury was worse than the one that he was dealing with during the preseason. But again, with athletes and recurring injuries, it just seems like when you have one and then you have another one, they're connected in some way. So
would you assume, or did he talk about that affects kickoffs the other day? I mean, obviously they were short. He kicked one out of bounds.
Yeah, he said, I just went out there and just kind of stuck it up and just tried to finish and just tried to do as much as I could. I thought, considering the fact that he did have 3 torn muscles, he did pretty well. There were some short kickoffs, certainly the one that went out of bounds. At the time, you're thinking, what's wrong with Cody Parkey? But we had been writing for weeks that he just didn't seem like he was the Cody Parkey from last year, even the one late in the last season. You knew that he had the injury, and then during this preseason, they kept downplaying the injury because, that's just what athletes do, and that's what the team does. But it was certainly affecting him.
Jeff, let's go back to that Monday press conference and talk about how Chip has been handling these injuries. Obviously, competitive advantage is a legitimate thing in the NFL, but when you have guys who are going to miss the entire season, like Parkey and Andrew Gardner, what is he gaining by not being, above board with these injuries? Do you really think he didn't know how serious these injuries were?
Well, I guess it's been a little bit of an issue, I guess, for those of us who cover the team for a living, just because you want to have the information and you're trying to get it to the people, get it to your readers. Because, again, they want to know about the team. I don't know. I really have to ask Chip that question. I don't know why he kind of plays hard to get on some of this information. He certainly knew what was up with Cody, and he certainly knew what was up with Andrew Gardner, or at least had some inclination. But, I think a lot of times teams don't want you to know what the injuries are, and I completely understand. That's because they don't want to give other teams information on their guys or what they may have to do personnel-wise. I get that. But to me, in some ways, you're putting your player in a bad spot because you're kind of downplaying his injury at times when in reality they're really hurt. And then the perception out there is that these guys aren't playing through, pain or they're kind of taking shortcuts here and there. But again, that's his prerogative. He's really under no obligation sometimes to talk specifically about injuries. They are required to give an injury report on Wednesday, Thursdays, and Fridays, and then a injury report for the game also on Friday. But other than that, they really had no other requirements.
Jeff, obviously the Gardner news late last night, it looked like that he was going to miss some time today. They put him on the injury reserve list. What is the feeling at right guard at this point? Is Tobin going to slide right in there? Is there going to be a little bit of a challenge or a battle this week between him and Kelly? How do they move forward without Gardner?
I can't imagine there being a battle. I mean, it sounds like Tobin's going to be the guy. I mean, he was the one that they had been dressing the first 2 weeks. Dennis Kelly wasn't dressed. He was active this past week and actually got in there when Jason Peters also left briefly. But barring some sort of complete surprise, I expect Tobin to be in there at right guard. You saw him there last year before Gardner eventually replaced him. So You know, I know a lot of people have been killing the interior of the line, and I think to some extent they've been right. But if you're talking about the whole entire group, but Gardner hasn't really been that bad. In fact, he's probably been one of their better run blockers these first 3 weeks. So there could be a decline. I thought late in the game last week, or at least on Sunday, what you saw was the run game suffering a little bit, and I think maybe that something had to do with Tobin just being tossed in there under short notice.
Jeff, when you look at this offense as a whole, and there have been issues really everywhere, from the quarterback, obviously the running backs have struggled at times, the offensive line, as you mentioned, and the receivers, the lack of separation you see from guys outside the numbers. Do you put one above everything else, or do you think it's a confluence of things that is constricting that side of the ball right now?
I don't think I put one above the other. I mean, the first 2 weeks I would have put the inability to run the ball more than anything at the top of the list, because the offense is certainly a run-based offense, and if you can't get that going, then it's going to really affect the passing game. And I think to some extent that's for a lot of offenses. And then you could just kind of, you know, throw I hate to say blame, but you can kind of point to various spots when it comes to run game. The offensive line, certainly number one. Chip Kelly, I think, deserves to be mentioned as well in terms of his game plan, and maybe at first it had vanilla plays, wasn't really dressing up his run plays as much as he probably needed to. And then the running backs, probably not as much at fault for the errors of the running game early on, but you know, I think there were times where DeMarco Murray may have gotten a little extra yard here or there. But again, you know, Bradford, as I wrote about after the game, he hasn't been good at all, and the receivers haven't helped him either. So, as you mentioned, a confluence of parts kind of playing into why the offense right now doesn't really inspire much confidence.
Jeff McLane from the Inquirer, Philly.com. You mentioned the inability to run the ball the first couple of weeks. They ran the ball better. No Murray last week. Apparently he did appear today, and some people would assume that Chip indicated, Jeff, that the player was given the opportunity to play, and he chose maybe not to play. That maybe some people took it that way. Did Murray appear to practice today? And if so, I know Chip's not going to say, well, this is what we're going to do, but is there any indication that Matthews has earned more playing time?
I didn't hear that take that Murray, you know, was given the option to play and decided not to. I mean, usually it's a conversation between the team and the player when they ultimately decide whether they should go or not. I know Chip certainly puts a lot of the responsibility on the player in terms of deciding whether he physically can do it or not.
Right.
I think he respects them in terms of how they feel about their bodies. So I think ultimately the final decision probably is the player. And a lot of times you'll see players go out there and play through injury when they shouldn't have. Todd Herman being a prime example from last year. So I'm not really sure exactly about that. Murray did practice today, but it was a light practice. So I don't know how strenuous it was in terms of on his hamstring and whether he'll be able to go by Sunday. My guess right now would be that he'll be able to play. You know, it was right up until game time that they decided that he couldn't go.
Yeah.
So I would think a week of rest and light practice should give him the opportunity to play on Sunday. And then to answer your question about, you know, whether Matthews has earned more playing time, I really thought that we'd see a little more. You know, I didn't think that Matthews would get the bulk of carries, but I always thought that he'd get, let's say, 10 to Murray's 20. And we didn't really see it in the first two games. But again, you really didn't see the run game at its maximum in those first games because they weren't able to run the ball much because they couldn't run the ball at all. Yeah,
now, and you know, like the carries were 25-11 between Sproles and Matthews. You know, if Murray gets 25 and Matthews gets 11, is that? I mean, you're watching him and watching Murray. Do you see two guys that are similar, or do you think that one guy's style is better than the other, or just that happened to be the way the game went the other day?
I think their style's a little different. You know, they've kind of Chip has kind of thrown them into the same bucket in terms of being one cut north to south guys, and I don't think that's entirely accurate. I do think that they do have some similar traits, but Matthews is a little faster. I'd say Matthews is a little bit bigger. I'd say Matthews is probably a little tougher and finish off his runs. Now, I would say Murray probably may have he's a little smoother, shall we say. I think he's got a little bit better vision in finding the creases and kind of hitting those holes. So I think that's where his strengths lie. But to answer your question about whether one skill set is better for this offense than another, I wrote a column early in August when Murray was dealing with his injury, his hamstring injury at the time, and Matthews looked really good in the offense. And I suggested or wrote that I thought that he may be better suited to this offense because in zone blocking, you're creating these creases for the running backs for them to slash through, and you got to be quick through those holes. And you saw a lot, certainly with LaShawn McCoy, and I think maybe Matthews has a little bit more motor to get through those holes, whereas DeMarco, he'll get to those holes, but sometimes, and you saw this in Dallas last year, for instance, he had the most yards prior to contact of any running back in the NFL. So he benefited certainly from one of the better run blocking offensive lines in the NFL. And I'm wondering if we're starting to see by not having that type of offensive line in Philadelphia, how it's affecting him as a running back.
Talking to Jeff McLane, does a great job on the Eagles beat for Philly.com and the Philadelphia Inquirer. Turning your attention to the defensive side of the ball, really, a lot of juice. Billy Davis's unit has played well enough to win now 2 weeks in a row, and they got a lot of guys. Brandon Bear on the line, Jordan Hicks, obviously the rookie linebacker, and Eric Rowe and E.J. Biggers in the defensive backfield. At every level, guys who hadn't been playing really stepped up against the Jets. What does that do for this team moving forward?
Well, it gives them a unit that can propel them to victory when the offense isn't clicking, and that's what we saw in the second half of the Jets game. I don't want to all of a sudden declare this defense the 85 Bears or even as good as the Seahawks of today, but I think it's a little bit better than we've seen the last few years. I mean, the Jets were without their number one running back, their number 2 wide receiver, and they have Ryan Fitzpatrick at wide receiver. So this isn't a powerhouse offense. But they really had a good game plan. I think he's got a little more talent in the secondary, particularly at the safety position. To me, that's been kind of the bright spot in that secondary, the way Malcolm Jenkins has been playing, but like he did last year. But with Walter Thurman next to him, I think Walter's a guy, unlike Nate Allen, that can probably do a little more. He's a little more versatile. I think that's helped the secondary. They've always been a good run defending team. You're not going to have to worry about that. Even when a guy like Cedric Jordan goes down, you're able to plug Brandon Bear in there. He's able to make plays in both the run and the pass. The depth of the inside linebacker position, as you mentioned, Jordan Hicks played well. You still have D'Amico there. I think Michael Kendricks will be back this week. It's starting to sound like Kiko Alonso could be done for the year. But you have Hicks now, and he's a nice player, certainly not overwhelmed by the moment against the Jets. I think he's got some more pieces this year than he's had previously on the defensive side of the ball.
Jeff, I guess a lot of people are mixed reviews right now on Bradford. Should they be patient? Is there growth here? Is this the guy we're going to get? Are we going to see a better version? What is your take on Bradford through 3?
He hasn't been good. He's been terrible. I thought the Jets game he managed to win. He didn't have any turnovers. That was important against a defense that had cost 10 in the first 2 weeks. And considering how the Eagles quarterbacks last year led the league in turnovers, it was good to see. He was off on a lot of throws. There were a few drops that didn't help him. But the big concern, again, as I mentioned earlier, is that he's the inability to throw downfield or the inability to have receivers that are getting separation downfield. Whatever it is, the passing game isn't jiving right now. I think, what it can be, and I think this is what Chip planned in the offseason, was that you can exploit teams in the middle of the field with Ertz and Sproles and certainly Jordan Matthews. But you got to have a strong running game to be able to do that. And if you can't get anything going on the ground, and that's when all of a sudden the passing game comes to a stop. And Bradford, I don't know. We could build it to an inaccurate quarterback, and we really haven't seen that. We saw in the second half of the Atlanta game. And I think it'll come. I think it'll be a little more accurate. I mean, it's only 3 games into this, but I think big picture, the big problem or the concern is that can he hit that pass downfield when you really need it? And that to me is a legitimate question.
Jeff McLane at Jeff_McLane from the Inquirer, Philly.com. Eagles, Redskins this weekend for all their coverage. And always a pleasure to catch up with Jeff McLane. Thanks, Jeff.
All right, guys. Thanks for having me.